I've started to question why people try to put so many parameters on something that feels edgeless. I'm not sure if the exclusivity reached by hypercategorization and a desperation for identity is as positive as I once did. I used to think that by every group finding a definition for itself, it would make it easier for people to find like-minded communities and foster more inclusion, but in reality I found it can do just the opposite. The pressures of trading one cultural insistence for another can lead to guilt by disingenuous portrayal of self. Trying to interpret someone's social cues who isn't adhering to the cultural insistence can be blurry and intimidating, in my experience. Advertising the type of person you are with signs and symbols is not exclusive to queer women, but it is the lens that I'll be using. David Barraby says in his book, Us and Them, just as these letters are both fixed chemicals arranged on the paper and a sequence of words, so anything that conveys a code is both itself and the thing it represents. In the case of humankinds, people themselves are often the objects that carry code. I think semiotics are used universally to create code in everything from graphic design to the performance of one's identity. I'm looking at everyone, not just the queers. The common thread of coding that runs through how we design ourselves seems so obvious, but I think it's so ingrained in us that we forget we're doing it. I spent the last year researching the history of queer women. Luckily, the subject is becoming better documented, but a lot of sources aren't readily Googleable, let alone in the South. I found myself talking to strangers that would introduce me to other strangers, to interview and go on awkward dates with, to coffee shops. Well, was it a date? Going into local Charlotte archives and even traveling to the world's largest collection of materials by and about lesbians, the Lesbian History Archives in Brooklyn, New York, where I almost spent the night when they shut the lights off in the third story of that dingy apartment. Drinking and partying have long been woven in the history of the LGBT community and almost feels like a rite of passage. Not only that, but bars and nightclubs are some of the only places to find each other. But as Hannah Gatsby questions in her Netflix special, Nanette, where do the quiet gays go? Charlotte has a handful of gay bars and queer-friendly places, but the bars are mostly men and queer-friendly is lovely, of course, but how am I going to find my people? Where do the quiet queers go? The sober ones? This has been a question that has been bubbling in the community across the nation. Charlotte has no LGBT community center or watering hole to go to. Through talking with the community, I saw a need for something to fill the space, and hatched the idea to have monthly queer meetups at rotating locations around the city called Queer City Hangouts. Using existing businesses as venues would help keep costs down while leveraging their platforms to promote the events. These events were already planned to start in May 2020, and I had them booked through September. Games in a coffee shop, games outside at a brewery, Blacklight Shakti yoga, indoor rock climbing, and these were all obviously postponed due to COVID-19. I was going to wrap this all up with a cute bow, climaxing at the first Queer City Hangouts event, but I'm sitting here going on month 8 of quarantine in the middle of a civil rights movement and a global pandemic, neither of which is a writing retreat. With the Black Lives Matter movement in full swing, protesting for racial equality, further educating myself on the race issues of our country, and amplifying Black, Indigenous, and people of color's voices seems to take a precedent, as does reflecting on ways these issues affect my work, my life, and vice versa. All the things that seemed to matter so much before this spring suddenly have a cloudy, shrink-wrapped, distant feel to them, lacking the urgency they once had. I put a lot of heart and effort into research, traveling to a city that was the epicenter for lesbian history, now an epicenter of a viral outbreak and protests, all while navigating cliquey tribes of old guard queer activists, unwanted advances, attending and eventually planning an entire branded event series, which is now postponed. Visiting the archives would require an act of Congress and a biohazard suit, so collecting interviews for the Charlotte Queer Oral History Archive will have to wait until a week or two after the end of the world wraps up. So what am I going to do with all this internet stalking now? How do my plans for all of this move forward when so much of what I wanted to pursue hinges on face-to-face connections? Ultimately, that is what my work has been all about. Human connections. I think the most interesting part of my research was the people I met in the process, as corny as that sounds. The visual body of work accompanying this thesis looks at how people conform for community and identity. Do you identify as an L in the LGBTQ community? Great. Now let's drill down and pick an archetype to assume with it. Don't worry, this comes with clothes, demeanor, hobbies, sexual roles, and more. Not much thought required. Whether you like living off the grid with your plant nursery or play 32 different sports, we have the stereotype for you. The following typographic risograph posters about each lesbian archetype, see what I did there, attempt to embody those socially designated characteristics of a person, assuming a supposedly all-defining identity. The types challenge the rules I've learned in design over the years about matching bowls, where typefaces are built, why not spray painted on a lawn, and so on. It can be a bit uncomfortable to read or look at, much like this book. Do you like this red line? But that's the point. I like poking fun at these lesbian tropes. They're so limiting and couldn't possibly define the complexities of any real human. We all subconsciously fall into our roles to some extent, and it was fun to make posters taking those tropes to an extreme, but in real life, we are all naturally more than one thing at the same time. The same is true in printing techniques, with its translucent inks randomly layered over each other, creating a more complex image than could ever be devised intentionally. Layering the stereotypographic posters on the risograph allowed for the querying of my original designs, creating unique compositions and sometimes illegible textures. The sport dyke. Her hair is always up if it isn't cut off or under a backwards baseball hat. She has an entire closet of gym clothes and sneaker variations. Probably has dated or slept with everyone on her rugby team, and now she wants to ask you out. Hey, do you want to come to my rugby game? Cottagecore. Oh look, she took a break from planting more things in her garden to build a mouse stick cut. How cute. Probably vegan. Does not need any more plants, but that won't stop her. Do you want to go plant shopping? The lumberjack lesbian, in her natural habitat, wearing their favorite flannel and work boots, buying more wood to U-Haul with her girl she has a second date with later. Want to go build a house later? Activist lesbian. Absolutely means the best. Attends every protest and volunteers in her community as much as possible, but sometimes doesn't know when to turn it off. Want to sign my petition? See? Also probably vegan. I don't make the rules. The bro girl. Too cool for you. Or at least she thinks she is. Want to run my hill later? Butch. Hey, wanna go for a ride? Cut and wood kick your ass. Traditionally in lesbian culture, the butch refers to a woman whose gender expression and traits typically present as masculine, but it's more about playing with traditional binary gender roles and expressions. Spaghetti girl. Yeah, I mean, I would totally be this bitch. I'm not really sure about vaginas or how that really works. I mean, you know what they say? And it's not like I hate all men. Straight into what? I'm just not really sure. But if I had enough of these, I could probably do you want to come over later? The pantsuit lesbian. Want to go on a date at 7? Don't be late, I barely squeezed this in. The e-girl. So want to go see my friend's band later? Please don't tell me it's ska. Are you in it? This is basically me, it's embarrassing. The lipstick lesbian. The femme. Poor thing, so cloaked in her. I fucking forgot something about being straight. She looks straight. She's very straight looking. She's not straight. I'm so sorry for you. Do you want to go to Sephora? This is really your color.
Okay, so I'm Kia. I go by the stage name Kia Comedy, Kia Barnes. I am a black lesbian, masculine presenting, or as you might call it, a stud. And what is it like to be a part of black queer culture in America today? Right now, I'm feeling really liberated. It's a great fight going on. I got married. I am divorced now. I got married at a time where it wasn't even legal across the country. So that's changed and gotten better. I think we're much more welcome and socially accepted to the point where the lesbian and gay bars are dying out because we can just about go anywhere. But you can't catch a good drag show there. What else? To be a black lesbian stud is to get a lot of the stereotypes that black men get and the discrimination without the pay raise. To be a black lesbian stud is to have whoever you're dating to expect you to open the door and take out the trash and kill the bugs, but I'm still a girl. What else? I think that's it.
A local Charlotte coffee shop, the same one I met my 72-year-old lesbian friend at, see page 44, asked me to exhibit these prints, and much to my delight, I sold out of all of the random layered prints. People direct messaged me on Instagram saying they loved that they didn't have to choose just one thing. These patrons summed up with their questions what I was trying to say with this whole thesis even better than I could. Sure, we'll all continue to advertise the type of person we are through semiotics, designing our appearance, and flying our subtle or not so subtle cultural flags, but my hope will remain that we can all find a community while at the same time allowing each other to be edgeless.